She tore the dress thinking she was humiliating a black waitress, but when the truth came out, the entire ballroom froze because the waitress she mocked was married to the man who owned everything in that room. The sound of laughter echoed through the marble hall like broken glass, sharp, fake, and dripping with privilege. At the center of it all stood a woman in a white designer gown, her smile poised, her eyes cruel. Across the room, a young black woman carried a silver tray of champagne glasses, careful not to draw attention. But fate doesn't need an invitation, only a moment. When their paths crossed, arrogance met grace, and hate revealed itself in front of the wrong witness. Because the woman she insulted, the one she thought was just a waitress, wasn't just anyone. She was married to the man who owned everything in that room. It was the annual Whitmore Charity Gala, an evening where wealth was displayed like armor and kindness was worn only for photographs. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, and laughter clung to the air like perfume. Every guest moved with calculated elegance, pretending generosity while measuring status. Amara hadn't planned to attend. She preferred quiet nights, art galleries, and solitude over champagne and gossip. But her husband insisted. Just for an hour, he'd said. It's good for business. Her husband, Jonathan Whitmore, was a self-made millionaire, an investor who'd built his empire from the ground up. Many knew his face. Few knew hers. Tonight, she arrived before him, dressed in a simple, elegant black dress, one that whispered grace instead of shouting wealth. It was handmade by a local designer she loved supporting. But among the glittering crowd, subtlety was often mistaken for insignificance. As she moved through the ballroom, several guests mistook her for staff. They handed her empty glasses, asked for napkins, and gestured toward tables as if she were invisible. She smiled politely, saying nothing. She had seen this before, at restaurants, hotels, even charity events. She didn't correct them. Sometimes silence spoke louder than confrontation. But not everyone could handle silence, and that night, one woman decided to make noise. Her name was Veronica Hayes, the queen bee of high society circles. Platinum hair, diamond necklace, entitlement woven into every syllable she spoke. Veronica had been watching Amara for several minutes, her lips curling into a smirk. New staff, she thought. Pretty one, too. When a waiter passed, she waved her manicured hand dismissively. I asked for fresh champagne, she muttered, but her eyes stayed fixed on Amara. Moments later, Amara walked past, tray in hand, helping another server with the crowd. It was instinct, kindness, not duty, but Veronica saw it as victory, and victory makes arrogance bolder. "Excuse me," Veronica snapped, stepping forward, blocking her path. "You there, yes, you, over here." Amara turned, gentle and composed. "Yes?" Veronica's voice dripped with condescension. "This table's a mess. Wipe it down before the guests arrive." For a second, silence filled the air. Several people nearby turned to watch. Amara set the tray aside slowly, her movements calm, deliberate. She didn't explain, she didn't protest. She simply took a napkin from the table and began clearing a few empty glasses, not out of obedience, but grace. But to Veronica, it looked like victory, and victory makes arrogance bolder. "Honestly," Veronica said, her laughter sharp, "you'd think the staff could at least dress properly. Who wears that kind of fabric to serve drinks?" Amara looked up then, eyes steady, calm, unreadable. "Is there a problem with my dress?" she asked softly. "Oh, sweetheart," Veronica sneered, stepping closer. "It's not your fault. I'm sure it looked fine until you started working near the guests." And before anyone could react, before reason could catch up, Veronica reached out, grabbed the hem of Amara's dress, and ripped the side seam with a violent tug. A sharp gasp swept across the room. The sound of tearing fabric cut through the music like a scream. Amara froze. Her breath caught. Her hand instinctively covered the torn fabric near her thigh. Her skin flushed with mix of shock and humiliation. But Veronica only laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound that made the room colder. "Now maybe next time the help will dress appropriately," she said, turning away, confident, untouchable. Except she wasn't, because standing behind her, unnoticed until that moment, was Jonathan Whitmore. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, they burned with quiet fury. The room fell into a hush. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye turned toward him as he stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Veronica," he said, each syllable calm enough to be terrifying, "you've just torn a dress worth more than your car." Confusion flickered in her face. What?" Jonathan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Power doesn't shout, it resonates. He stepped beside Amara, gently wrapping his jacket over her shoulders, covering the tear. "This woman you just humiliated is my wife," he continued. The silence that followed was suffocating. Veronica's face drained of color. The room, once filled with whispers and laughter, now vibrated with shock. Her lips trembled as she looked around, for someone to laugh, to deny, to deflect. But all she saw were eyes, judging, disgusted, unforgiving. Jonathan didn't look at her again. He didn't need to. He turned toward the guests, his arm around Amara, his voice still calm. This event was meant to celebrate generosity and compassion. Yet tonight, it's shown me how much work we still have to do. He looked toward the staff, the waiters, the cleaners, the people in the background, the ones always overlooked. "Respect," he said, "isn't something you buy with money or titles. It's something you show, especially to those who serve you." The crowd stood silent. A few lowered their heads. A few clapped quietly. Veronica tried to stammer out an apology, but words wouldn't come. Her hands shook. Her perfect image was cracking, and the world was watching. Jonathan guided Amara away, his hand steady on her back. Every step they took echoed louder than any insult that had been thrown that night. Behind them, Veronica stood frozen, her laughter gone, replaced by the heavy silence of shame. For the first time in her life, she felt small, not because someone told her she was, but because her own reflection finally showed her who she'd become. Later that night, Amara sat on the balcony of their penthouse suite, wrapped in Jonathan's jacket. The city lights shimmered below, distant, indifferent, beautiful. She thought about the countless moments people like Veronica never saw, the quiet humiliations, the constant assumptions, the way dignity was tested in silence. She had faced it all before, but tonight something was different. Tonight, someone saw. Jonathan joined her, setting a cup of tea beside her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Sometimes love wasn't in words. It was in protection, in presence, in understanding. The next morning, headlines exploded across social media. Socialite humiliates a woman at charity gala, learns she's the host's wife. The video, captured by a guest, went viral within hours. Veronica's sponsors dropped her. Her friends distanced themselves. And for once, the apology wasn't enough. But it was never about revenge. It was about truth. Seen, felt, undeniable. A week later, Jonathan announced a new charity fund, not for gala events or elite dinners, but for service workers who faced discrimination and hospitality in retail. He named it the Amara Foundation. Amara returned to her art, her quiet routines, her peace. She never mentioned that night again. She didn't need to. Sometimes silence carried more power than any public statement. And as the city slept beneath a sky full of forgiving stars, one truth remained. Respect costs nothing, but reveals everything. When you judge someone by their skin, You expose your own worth, not theirs.